Merry Christmas. Let's dive into some Pacers lineup data, see what trios and duos can reveal about what tweak could be made to the rotation, plus some thoughts on upcoming potential moves at center, and a little bit about something I read in a report that was certainly interesting to me concerning the Pacers. It's all coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Thursday and Merry Christmas, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and Circle City Spin, and today I have a Santa hat on, and we are going to be talking about lineup combos, something I like to do at this stoppage about this time of year, usually a little bit more instructive because there's been more combinations. There's been more time with lots of groups on the floor this year with all the injuries, with so many players in and out. Some of these are very confusing, as you'll see when we get in. One of their few duos with more than 100 minutes has Garrison Matthews in it. He's been on the team for all of 4 weeks, but still revealing on something I think they could do just a smidge better in terms of setting up some players for success and others for not success. We'll talk about the team center situation, and why I think a move could potentially be coming for more than just who is healthy and available at the 5. And something else interesting I want you to keep an eye on as it pertains to a report somewhere else, not even related to the Pacers, but I thought was certainly interesting to me with something I talked about a lot in the offseason. Let's start with lineups and combos, 2-man combos, 3-man combos. What is interesting about them this year for this Pacers team, who is bad? They're 6-24. That's not good. A lot of their numbers are going to be bad. In fact, of their duos, of their 2-man combinations that have played more than 100 minutes, only 9 of them have a net rating above 0. That's bad. And we'll talk about an obvious theme of those when we get to duos, because I bet you can guess who's in almost all of those 2-man combinations. But that was certainly like, whoa, that is a small number of actual players that are in this grouping. But I actually want to start with trios, because 1 or 2 players really dominate the conversation here, right? They're top trios with more than 50 minutes. And 50 minutes is not even that many when it comes to interesting lineups. But with trios, 50 is a little more like, okay, this is an intentional choice. With duos, I do 100. The top trio has TJ McConnell. The second one has McConnell. The third one has Siakam. The sixth one has McConnell. The seventh one has McConnell. The sixth one actually has both McConnell and Siakam. The ninth one has Siakam. The 10th one has Siakam. Like, if you get the gist of where this is going, and this will come up in duos as well, basically all of the Pacers' best groups have McConnell or Siakam. The best way to build a successful lineup for the Pacers, regardless of who the other 2 players are, is to have one or both of those guys on the floor. And I think you probably could have guessed that before I started, right? What really works for the Pacers this year and makes their offense, and that's usually, by the way, the end of the floor, where things have the most variance. Their defense is typically on their best groups, low 100s to 110-ish, and their offense is where the variance is. Their best groups in terms of actually scoring the ball and having a good enough offense to look like a real team is because those 2 guys make stuff happen for the whole collective lineup, I think, at the best level for this team this year with gravity. Pascal Siakam's gravity comes in that he is a very, very talented player. Kalen Cooper posted a screenshot of this from the Celtics game, so it's just fresh in my brain. But, like, he often is catching and seeing a double immediately. That's been a thing the whole season. And how the Pacers react to that and how well they're cutting and how sharp they look on offense, generally you can tell pretty early in the game where that's going. But there's this screenshot against the Celtics where he is below the block, and there are 4 Celtics defenders who are closer to him than their own man. One guy is guarding the rest of the team, and Siakam can and has made that pass out sometimes, but it's hard. And so he has that kind of gravity, and McConnell's gravity is less that and more that he is with the most frequency of anyone who's played a lot this year. There are other guys who can do this, can get into the paint and make a defense react, and then keeps the ball moving. Ben Mathurin gets in the paint a lot and can score himself, although his rim finishing, maybe it's a toe thing, maybe it's a thing for his whole career, if you look at certain stats, has not really been awesome, and it's not like he passes out of those a ton. McConnell gets in there, and the defense rotates in reaction. They can keep an advantage going with ball movement. They have a lot of other guys who can do these things with some frequency. When Nembhard's at his best, he gets all the way to the rim. I still think that's the biggest gripe with his play this season, is that he does not get all the way to the basket. Quentin Jackson can do some of these things, but has not played enough to really factor in this, although he will come up in just a second for a positive reason. Some other guys have at least some sort of, the defense has to worry about them. But every trio, there's not a lot to say besides that is if you want to build a successful pairing or trio for the Pacers, put Siakam or McConnell on the floor. What did they do against the Bucks 2 nights ago? It's crunch time. They're down 16. They're going to give it one last push in this fourth quarter. And it's McConnell, Siakam, Nembhard, Mathurin, right? All 4. They wanted McConnell in that group. Truly, if you made me put their best 5 on the floor right now, and, Toppin notwithstanding because he's hurt, McConnell, Nembhard, Mathurin, Siakam would be 4 of the 5. Your 5th could be a center. It could be a wing, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. But that would be 4 of the 5. And lineup data bears that out. The groups that don't have them, for example, the Pacers' 4th best trio with more than 50 minutes this year is Garrison Matthews, Isaiah Jackson, and Jarris Walker. I think that might be just a wee bit lucky that group has a 117 offensive rating. I find that to be a little bit hilarious. If you put Quentin Jackson out there instead of Garrison Matthews, same thing. That group has also been pretty good. Maybe Jarris Walker plus Isaiah Jackson is just an awesome lineup. But let's flip it the other direction. The worst trios I actually found more instructive. And it relates to something I talked about this week with Andrew Nembhard's insane plus minus and net rating data that just make absolutely zero sense to me. Of the worst Pacers trios with more than 50 minutes, almost all of them, 12 of the worst 14, have either Jarris Walker or Andrew Nembhard. The worst one has both. The second worst one has both. The third worst one has both. The 4th worst one has Nembhard. The 5th worst one has Jarris. The 6th worst one has Nembhard. The first bottom 10 trio without them actually has Siakam and Huff and Garrison Matthews, which is quite funny. That group, of course, cannot guard anything. They have a 127 defensive rating. But seeing those 2 in there reinforce something I talked about earlier, that Nembhard's groups have been quite poor, especially because his minutes without Siakam have not gone well for the team. But it also revealed something else that should be super obvious about Nembhard specifically with his on-off numbers, his net rating numbers, things of that nature, is that when he is not with Siakam, no one else has this detriment to the extent Andrew Nembhard has. He is playing with Jarris Walker. And so you're going to see Jarris in a lot of these poor lineup combos because I said when I talked about Nembhard that Nembhard has, at the time, they've played 2 games since, had the highest percentage of his minutes with Pascal Siakam of any player on the team at 73.52. Of their actual rotation players, Jarris Walker has the lowest percentage of his minutes played with Pascal Siakam at 54.3, especially of actual rotation guys. Of everybody with over 200 minutes, Isaiah Jackson is the second fewest percentage with Siakam, and he's over 64%. It's not even close, right? So that is obviously going to hurt Jarris a little bit and hurt Nembhard a little bit because that means Nembhard is playing more with Jarris, as are a lot of guys. But by the way, if you are an everyday listener, you have been for years, you'll remember me doing this duos and trios exercise last year. A lot of the worst units had Jarris Walker anyway. 8 of the bottom 10 have one or both of Nembhard or Walker, and that's actually 12 of the bottom 14. I should have realized this when doing Nembhard stats because Pascal doesn't play with Jarris as much. Most of these groups that stink, most of these trios that stink, their offensive rating is dreadful. For example, that Nembhard Huff Walker trio, which is the worst net rating trio with more than 50 minutes, has an 83.5 offensive rating. That's horrible. That is absolutely horrible. There's not a lot of dynamic play there. There's not a lot of paint pressure. And that is what actually was revealed from this, is that I really wanted to dive into this with Jarris because I just did the exercise with Nembhard earlier this week. You can go back and listen to that a few days ago. All of Jarris Walker's trios that are good, that's what I wanted to look at, contain one of Quentin Jackson or TJ McConnell. For example, if you go search for all of Jarris Walker's trios with more than 50 minutes, you'll see Jackson and Quentin Jackson, Isaiah Jackson, Jarris Walker. And then you'll see Quentin Jackson, Jarris Walker, Aaron Nesmith. And then you'll see Quentin Jackson, Jarris Walker, Siakam, and then McConnell, Siakam, Walker, and then McConnell, Matthews, Walker. And you can keep going through that exercise and find that out. That revealed to me that it is possible that Walker Nembhard is just an awful fit together. And that makes some sense to me, but how many times have we talked about this with Jarris Walker since the Pacers drafted him, that one of his better skills as a creator, as an offensive player, is not creating an advantage, not getting past someone on his own, but if the defense is already busted or there's already a little advantage and then the ball comes to him, he's very good at keeping that advantage alive, at taking a little bit of space in front of him and luring a defender in and then keeping it moving and getting a shot up quickly if he sees the space to do so. That is where he is good. And so I think that something that is hurting him, and Drew is not really that kind of advantage creator type, is exactly that. And so if I'm the Pacers and I'm trying to make Walker's numbers look better or make Nembhard's numbers look better, I would not pair them as much. I would separate them more often and try to get more McConnell and Quentin Jackson with Jarace Walker. I think that is extremely true for the Pacers this year, and their best and worst lineups bear that out. Let's do the duos really quick. Duos are a little less instructive for this team with how many injuries that they've had. Like I said, they only have 8 groups with more than 100 minutes played together with a positive net rating. Guess what? Almost all of them have either Pascal Siakam or TJ McConnell. Obviously, right? There's so many ways to have 2 guys on the floor at the same time. The top one, of course, their highest net rating duo with over 100 minutes is in fact both of those players, TJ McConnell and Siakam. Then it's Siakam, Ethan Thompson. Then McConnell, Mathurin's there. Siakam, Quentin Jackson, McConnell, Huff, right? So the only 2 groups with above 0 that don't have either of those guys is one group that the Pacers said, let's try starting these 2 together. They've been consistent, which is Tony Bradley and Jeremiah Robinson Earl, which is very funny. And the other one is Quentin Jackson and Jarace Walker. How funny. So if I'm the Pacers, what I learned from this is, one, if you're trying to make your offense better, pair McConnell and Siakam more often. All of McConnell's minutes with Siakam. I get the temptation to split them to make your floor higher, but if you need a higher ceiling, put both of them together. And 2, play Jarace with the dynamic point guards, with McConnell and with Quentin Jackson, more so than with Nembhard, to also improve your floor. I think that would help the Pacers lineups quite a bit. Let's keep going here and talk about center moves that I think could be coming for the Pacers and why it's more than just health reasons. Keep an eye on that. It's coming up here on Locked On Pacers. But first, everybody, I need to tell you about PrizePicks. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. The holiday season is one of the best times of the year for sports, bowl games, big basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It's all happening at once while we're all making choices every day. One of the most fun places to make the right call is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. They've added an extra layer of excitement to the holiday sports schedule. You can create a lineup in less than a minute. The app makes the process smooth and intuitive. You can choose from a huge range of stats: fantasy score, field goals attempted, free throws made, turnovers, whatever fits your strategy. You can get early payouts with that feature. You can stack one player with up to 3 times in one lineup with different stats. Deposits and withdrawals are quick and easy. Keeps everything flowing. So download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it is good to be right. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Make your second listen any of the teams the Pacers have played recently or are about to play to see what they're saying. The Celtics are the next opponent. The Pacers just played them. John Corrales will have more. And thank you for tuning in from my very temporary setup for Christmas week. I hope the audio and video sounds good. It was very not great the first day I sat here, so hopefully it is a little bit better today. Okay, I mentioned this a little yesterday, but I would like to remind everybody of the Pacers' current situation at the 5. One is that Jay Huff is not playing well of late. 3 for 7 against Milwaukee, 1 for 6 against Boston, 3 for 8 against New Orleans, 2 for 7 against New York. Not good, right? He is in the middle of a not good stretch. His defensive impact has been a little bit neutralized. Teams are figuring out how to keep him away from the rim a little bit more. His block numbers are down. He was chasing blocks to his detriment at times. He's only had a positive plus-minus once since the NBA Cup break. He was +4 against the Knicks. He is not playing very well. Then behind him is Isaiah Jackson, who has a concussion after Mias Queta hit him in the face twice on the same possession in Boston. He was playing well. I thought his energy of late had been noticeably awesome, and he might have been playing better than Huff of late until the injury. So they lose that. Tony Bradley's thumb is fractured right now. He actually played last night, 2 nights ago, when this comes out, with that fractured thumb. I have a picture of the brace. It's quite big. And then James Wiseman, they are fortunate, especially after Jackson's concussion, that they could have gotten James Wiseman onto the team because they needed somebody else to play. He played over 10 minutes in all of his games. I mean, it's just comical bad luck for Wiseman with injuries for him and others that he played more on this 10-day contract than he did on both of his previous 2 contracts with the Pacers combined. So they had 4 centers for a second there, but let's talk about what's happening now. So Huff's set to the side that Huff isn't playing well. That is a factor, and the Pacers need better center play to win games. When they signed Wiseman, Jackson was healthy. Now he's not. And concussions can take a week, 10 days, maybe less. I'm not going to guess, but it's not a good thing. And Bradley's thumb is clearly not a good thing with the brace he's wearing and the fact that they felt like they needed a center, even with keeping him active. You could argue and should argue right now the Pacers need another center, like on their team right now. And the problem is James Wiseman's hardship contract is over. Well, it's not over when this episode comes out. It'll be over the day after this. But I'm not certain the Pacers will get another hardship deal. Jackson does not currently contribute to one. Bradley isn't even missing time. McConnell came back, right? The only guys who have been out for long enough would be Shepard, Nesmith, Toppin, and Haliburton. And I don't know on the timelines of Shepard or Nesmith if they're going to contribute. With Shepard, I've seen him move around and shoot threes in practice. I feel like maybe not for him. If they aren't eligible for another hardship deal, can they really go into a game with Huff, Jackson as their only healthy centers, and healthy is in air quotes for not Huff Jackson. Huff Bradley is their only healthy centers, and Bradley's even in air quotes because of his thumb? Probably not. But what can they even do about this if they aren't eligible for a hardship? They would have to waive someone to make this happen. So the reason they would need to make a move at center is just based on that, right? They might not be healthy enough at the 5 right now. We've seen this team make moves to try to field a rotation that makes sense. Even if you think they should try to be losing every game right now, having the right players playing the right positions still helps everyone, right? That's still good for the entire team to have that. So having a 5 that is a 5 or knows how to play the 5 and set good screens and play defense at that position or space the floor in a way that helps everybody else have more space is still valuable. So it would not surprise me if the Pacers spend this little 2-day break around the holiday looking to figure out what to do at center. Maybe they believe in Tony Bradley because he played against the Bucks. He was on the floor with the thumb injury against the Bucks. Okay. Well, that'd be fine, but they still need another one until Jackson is back. Maybe Jackson will be back Friday and this is all neutralized. But let me throw one more hat in the ring. Let me throw one more bit of information at you that makes this interesting. Is that contracts guarantee for the full season in the NBA, if you are under contract on January 10th, that is in 2 weeks and 2 days from the day this episode comes out. And to have your non-guaranteed contract removed from a team's salary, you actually have to be waived by January 7th to clear waivers by the 10th. So that's less than 2 weeks from today. And that is relevant because teams don't really do this, but you can't sign 10-day deals until January 5th. But what happens now in late December is, in theory, if you sign a player to a non-guaranteed deal right now, it's basically a 2-week tryout. Are you good enough to be on our team for the full season? If you'll recall, the Pacers signed Kiefer Sykes to a non-guaranteed deal basically on New Year's, and he ended up making it through the guarantee date for the Pacers. He played pretty well in his first 10 days, and it was basically like a 10-day contract without being a 10-day contract. This would be a little longer than 10 days, but if they wanted to evaluate another center instead of or versus Tony Bradley, or just to have another center and then not have to guarantee his deal, now is a good time to have that problem. To the extent that there is such thing as a good time to have a problem, now is that time. So the contract timeline does matter here in that they wouldn't have to make a significant commitment, even if they actually had to do standard contract stuff right now. So I'll talk about probably these upcoming deadlines with more detail tomorrow, but to make them a little more detailed for this current discussion about centers, the 2 non-guaranteed deals would be Garrison Matthews and Tony Bradley for the Pacers. Keep an eye on them. They would not want, maybe they would because he's hurt, but would they waive a center to help their center depth? Maybe not. Would they waive Garrison Matthews to help their center depth? Maybe. One difference is Garrison Matthews cannot sign a 10-day contract with the Pacers this season anymore. He already did twice on a hardship deal, but Tony Bradley can. And so if you'll recall what they did with James Johnson, for example, last year, I can't remember, 2 years ago, you can waive a guy on his guaranteed deal, then sign them to 10 days. And that gets you pretty dang close to the trade deadline. And so Tony Bradley has that advantage in that the Pacers could waive him on January 7th and then sign him to a 10-day on January 10th and 21st or whatever, and get pretty close to the deadline with minimal changes to your roster. But that does increase your flexibility for trades. They can't do that with Garrison Matthews in his 10 days. I'll explain that in more detail tomorrow. But basically, because they can have a tryout, because they can have more flexibility with Bradley, because they're so hurt at the 5, it would not shock me if they waived Garrison Matthews to sign another center this week. They might need to do it. And then they could waive that player when Bradley and Jackson are back and figure out what to do with their last roster spot or how they want to guarantee contracts, things of that nature. So just keep an eye on that. I find that all very, very interesting, and certainly something the Pacers have to consider with their current health situation. Jake Fisher said something very interesting about Jonathan Kuminga. Yes, not a Pacers player, but Jonathan Kuminga that I want to talk about to close out today's Locked On Pacers. But first, everybody, I need to talk to you about DoorDash. The season is heating up, and DoorDash has a way to keep fans in their bag the whole way through. Whether you are watching the highlights, the tunnel fits, or just your favorite player, DoorDash makes the entire season more fun because every player has their bag, and with DoorDash, fans have one too. DoorDash keeps your snacks stocked, your gear fresh, and your watch party vibes absolutely on point. There are nights when your team stresses you out. Let DoorDash become your post-game therapy. Sometimes you just need dessert now. Those late-night interviews hit, and suddenly you need chips at midnight. DoorDash is built for exactly that. If the group chat says pull up, DoorDash, make sure you show up prepared. Snacks, cups, even a phone charger for the friend who's always at 2%. From tip-off to overtime, stay in your bag. And order on DoorDash. Get snacks, drinks, gear, whatever gets you through the season delivered right to your door. DoorDash in your bag all season long. And we're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day or second. Let's Locked On NBA game night. Wes Goldberg and I talked about all the games of Christmas Eve. Hilariously, there were 0. So we spent a lot of time talking about Spurs Thunder, and we assigned Santa Claus assignments for many teams. So that was a fun time. I got to put my Santa hat to good use. Continuing here in Pacerland, I was reading reporting from Jake Fisher in advance of the trade deadline, as one does. I'll just see what's going on. And he was at the G League Showcase down in Orlando. You can read all this in the Stein line at Mark Stein Stubbs. That's very good stuff. And Jake was talking about Kuminga and the Warriors and has this sentence in his story, in his reporting. It says, quote, I polled various executives on the subject, and none of them indicated that Kuminga's play over the next few weeks would change their current evaluation of him as an NBA player. And I thought, that's interesting, because if you'll recall before the season, I said something about Ben Mathurin that was similar. Not that I am reporting anything, but just that there was this notion that more playing time and more minutes and opportunity could boost the trade value of many Pacers players. You know, Jarris Walker, Ben Mathurin, Ben Shepherd, anyone who's playing more. And I said at the time, don't get me wrong, that could happen if they play well. But when has that actually happened? Like, when has a guy gotten a bigger featured role in a setting like that, and all of a sudden their trade value goes way up, and then they actually get traded? Because usually, if they play well enough that it actually would change their value or the perception of them from other teams, the team that they're on is also probably like, oh, sick. They're actually doing things that help us or change our perception of them as a player. I always cited the same thing with this. I don't know how many of you actually remember this or even cared about this stretch happening. Daniel Tice was with the Pacers. Obviously, he was in the Aaron Nesmith, Malcolm Brogdon trade, and whatever. He barely played for the Pacers. I think he played 9 total games for the Pacers. 8 games for the Pacers in 2 years, and I'm pretty sure 7 of those games happened right before the 2022-23, so the 2023 trade deadline, when he recovered from that injury, that weird procedure, and he came back on February 2nd. And he played in 5 straight games until the 10th. And then he played 2 more games the whole season in favor of Jalen Smith, Isaiah Jackson, younger guys, right? Younger players on the team. And it was obvious for the Pacers, who were not good that year, to play the younger players instead of Daniel Tice. Daniel Tice was good. He's a good player, but they should have played the young guys. And everybody said, oh, this is great. They're featuring Daniel Tice because everybody will see that he's healthy and be more interested in trading for him. And I'm like, really? Like, our executives like, oh my gosh, Daniel Tice played 5 times. Suddenly we're willing to trade stuff for him. Like, no, right? And so with Mathurin and Walker, I think what applies to this Kuminga quote is relevant in that if they play well all of a sudden, the Pacers would be the team more interested in that, not opposing teams. I don't think their value or their likelihood of being traded really changes a ton now because they've been in the league long enough that a perception of them has formed. I'm not saying it doesn't change at all, right? If you are somebody, and I'm using those 2 players as an example because they're recent lottery picks, but this really applies to anyone on the Pacers who could, in theory, be moved in the next, whatever it is till the trade deadline, 7 weeks, 6 weeks. is that most people have you should, if you're an executive or a lead decision maker or whatever, a talent evaluator, be willing to use new information to change your opinion of players. But usually it's hard to shake what your current evaluation is. You have to see long sustained change, and usually success, but sometimes failure, to really have it be changed. And I think, a lot of people are already kind of entrenched in that. So I wanted to know, does that quote about Kuminga apply to any Pacers? Because I have seen from fans of late multiple suggestions. So this is not a one-person thought. I'm not just speaking to like one listener and wasting my time. Many people have said they would suggest, should the Pacers not be playing Jarris right now? With the reason being that he is playing so poorly, or he's playing poorly enough that it is hurting his trade value to be on the floor. And my answer to that is like, no, I don't think that's a thing. I think that the way he has played for 2 years already had his trade value pretty low. And I don't think playing him more is going to make it even lower. If anything, I think given what his time with the Pacers has been, some teams would rely on their pre-draft value. The teams that would believe in him would rely more on their pre-draft evaluation than what he's done with the Pacers, given that he wasn't in the rotation's rookie year and then got hurt, spot minutes last year, whatever you want to say. The same applies to Mathurin, where it's like, people are saying, should they not be playing him with this toe thing? It's not helping the team win. It might be hurting his trade value. It's like, what teams think of him is already what they think of him. And that's not to say that those two, there aren't teams that would believe in these players. I know of people who are, into these guys to some extent who do not work for the Pacers or did not draft them, right? I think what will happen for these two guys and from now until the trade deadline, and for any young player on the Pacers, if Ben Shepherd returns, Johnny Furphy, Cam Jones, I'm not even saying those guys, any of these guys are on the trade block, but if they are, what happens will just mostly reinforce what people already think. And that's what was basically being said about Kuminga. Even if he plays well, like he balled out in that Minnesota series last year. He was awesome. And that didn't change his value like at all, right? So I think that most people, if they are or they are not, and there are people who are and are not fans of every player in the NBA in every corner of the league, that will stay the same if these guys play or don't play or play well or don't, because there's years of data about them and what they are and aren't good at. And I think that for every non-stud player in the NBA, that is somewhat true. That is somewhat factual. And so if they absolutely rock for the next 6 weeks, any Pacers player, anyone, is absolutely awesome out of nowhere for the next 6 weeks, that does not necessarily increase their trade value. It increases their value to the Pacers. And that is why you play young guys, because you're trying to improve their value to your team, the team that they are currently on, the team that has invested resources and made decisions with them in mind. Almost every player in the league has more value, not all of them. Most players in the league have the most value to the team they are currently on than other teams, because the team they're currently on has spent years or months or whatever making decisions and investing resources with that player in mind or into that player. And so they know that player the most, they know what they're about, and they know their value and their specific role to a team. And so it's really hard for that to really shake in a way that ups their trade value, in a way that the team would also want to trade them more. So I thought that was a very telling quote from Jake about Kuminga that I think does apply to name your Pacers player if you're a listener who wants to or doesn't want to see somebody traded. But this was more about the notion that I've seen from people suggesting to not play certain young guys who are playing bad because it hurts their trade value. I don't even necessarily believe that that's a thing. I think their trade value was hurt from not just this season, but years of buildup or non-buildup to their current reality. And that is where I leave you on this Christmas Day. Hope you're having a happy holiday. If you're listening to this on a commute to work, you were a superhero rock star for working on Christmas Day. If you're listening to this on Christmas Day, you're a superhero or a rock star for taking some time to listen to me talk on a holiday. If you're hanging out with family today and didn't listen to this till later, I hope you had a great holiday. We'll be back tomorrow, potentially with a guest. We'll see. It might actually work out. And then right back into a back-to-back on the 26th. So the games keep coming for the Pacers. We'll have it all right here on Locked On Pacers. You can find me on social media at Tony R. East in this podcast at Locked On Pacers. Have a Merry Christmas, everybody. We'll see you very soon.